unleashing an unholy reign of terror that holds an entire community in the grip of eternity.
The struggle between good and evil goes on.
Welcome to Good Movie, Bad Movie, the podcast where we delve into the best and worst of the cinematic world. Each week, we dissect two movies that are interconnected by subject, genre, or theme, and challenge the labels of good and bad, questioning whether the general public's perception is accurate.
So what makes a movie good? Our definition hinges on movies that have garnered over 65% on major rating platforms or were acclaimed as good upon their release.
And what about a bad movie? We categorize these as films that have received under 65% on major rating platforms or were deemed as bad or even banned upon their initial release.
So Rocky Horror Picture Show. People love it. They dress up. It's a whole thing now. However, when it first came out, people hated it. And so we would actually still consider that a classic bad movie.
At the close of each episode, we decide whether the public rating aligns with reality. Could a good movie potentially be bad and vice versa? Probably.
Maybe. Absolutely.
We're the only ones who get to decide.
We can't hear you. So it's just us. I'm Alyssa Bonanno. And
I'm Bec Hack.
And we're your hosts for Good Movie, Bad Movie.
Mm-hmm. The arbiters of taste.
The arbiters of taste. Whether that taste is good or bad is also to be determined.
It's completely subjective.
And because you can only hear us talk, it's good.
So this week we're jumping into Scream 2, directed by Wes Craven.
And Urban Legend, directed by Jamie Blanks.
Yeah, so Scream 2 is our good movie, and Urban Legend is our bad movie, according to public perception. We will determine where they're going to duke it out this episode.
Yeah. I also love that we have a sequel in here that is the good movie. I feel like actually more often than not that will never happen ever again. But
you never know. What if we take on like The Godfather Part 2 or something?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's just get right in. No initial movies. We're only going to have the second, thirds, and fourths of every major
sequelitis. It's a different podcast now.
Done. We've changed it.
We chose these films because both are 90s teen slashers. And when they came out, horror was going through a bit of a resurgence or reformatting. Slashers in particular had been struggling through the 90s due to poor performance of sequels for existing franchises like Halloween and Friday the 13th.
What number would we have been on for Halloween and Friday the 13th?
I think the most recent one that had come out for Friday the 13th, it was either Jason Takes Manhattan.
Oh my God, I forgot that happened.
Or Jason Goes to Hell, which would have been around 1995. And that, I believe, were the 7th or 8th entries in the series. So we were, they were cooking it up.
Jason Takes Manhattan always kind of reminds me. I've actually admittedly never seen it. I really need to. But it kind of reminds me of Kevin McAllister taking Manhattan, and he like slides through Trump's legs. That's all I think about. But Jason just being mischievous and running around New York, just like
Jason at Times Square, Jason at the Statue of Liberty. I've never seen any Friday the 13th movie. I haven't seen a single one.
Whoa.
Yeah, I know.
Oh.
But I haven't gotten around to it
No,
yet,
it's one of those ones.
Yeah.
But you've seen like Sleepaway Camp.
Love
like you went
Sleepaway Camp.
It might be hard for you to watch now, but
that's kind of what I'm thinking. I feel like I kind of missed the boat on that one, and it's not gonna hit.
It's worth watching. The first one's good. Okay, wait. To bring us back a little bit. All of these original, when we're saying like the golden age of slashers, this is like roughly 70s, right?
Yeah, I would say the 70s, like especially like late 70s through the early 80s. That's when we had Halloween, Friday the 13th, and even those that didn't go on to create successful franchises. There were some really great original, I'd say I might even go so far as to maybe not say artful, but crafty entries like, Sleepaway Camp that we love, Black Christmas.
Crafty. I love the kitsch entries into the genre. Yeah.
I can't say it's like, oh, it's beautiful, but I'm like, they worked pretty well with what they had. That's some cool scrap art. Existing franchises had totally lost their luster, and there was nothing really new coming out. The formula was tired. The new stuff was cheap. It wasn't resonating. But thanks to Scream, which was released in 1996, horror became, I would go so far as to say for the first time, meta, where the killer and the victims were aware of horror movies and horror tropes. And Scream even went so far as to define the rules for horror movies. And that resonated a lot with audiences. It was a huge hit, and it led to other, I'd say, like self-aware, meta, like really dialogue and characterization driven horror, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the show. I mean, the original movie is actually pretty good too, the 80s one.
Oh, that's from the 80s, the original Buffy?
I want to say late 80s, early 90s, yeah.
Oh, so the show's 1997. Okay,
yeah.
that makes total sense.
So Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I Know What You Did Last Summer, which was actually written by the writer of Scream 1 and 2, Kevin Williamson, and Urban Legend and Scream 2. Yeah, on that note,
let's dive in. So Scream 2 is a slasher film directed by Wes Craven, released in 1997, less than a year after the first Scream. When they were sold originally, they were kind of more or less sold as a package.
Yeah, with the hope that it would be built out into a franchise. So there was the full Scream script, which was, sent around to producers. And then there was a 5-page outline for Scream 2. And I believe actually even for Scream 3, there's hopes to build it out, like, to entice buyers. Scream 2 entered pre-production while the original Scream was still in theaters, and it was released less than a year after the first film.
And I like that they kind of tackled two different pieces of the traditional horror trope. And so Wes obviously had an awareness of this. Scream 1, which we won't speak about too heavily, but was originally set kind of as a extremely traditional Halloween-esque slasher. Takes place mostly in one set piece, a house.
Absolutely.
Scream 2, college campus, which is kind of where the second half of the genre really heavily relied, whether you're thinking about Sorority Row or Black Christmas. And so it was kind of built out in this way where, at least in my interpretation, Wes was trying to cover off on the genre as a whole throughout each of these different explorations into the Scream franchise.
It feels fitting that Scream 2 is inevitable, to follow Scream 1, because so much of horror also and horror films is about the franchise and the sequel that comes out, and it ups the gore, it ups the kills, it ups, like, you have a better budget, like you have better actors, hopefully, if your first film was a hit. I even think of modern movies like Terrifier, where I feel like, the first one came out and it was kind of a curiosity, but then the second film came out, and that's when I think it really started to get attention and start to build on itself as a franchise.
And one thing I love about this too is we have kind of these idols or icons. I'm not quite sure what you'd call it. Jason is one, Freddy is one, where it almost becomes a symbol for the character and the villain becomes a symbol for the entirety of the franchise. And what's so great about Scream and Ghostface is they took something that was kind of ubiquitous with Halloween, something that existed, something that really had no singular point of origin, and went, we're just going to adapt this and show how, he's making fun of everyone, but kind of how easy it is for us to build an entire ideology and kind of urban legend around this, wink, wink, but around this thing that everyone has some sort of basic familiarity with.
Yeah.
It also reminds me, do you know David Pumpkins?
No.
You don't know David Pumpkins, the
His name
SNL
is
skit?
David Pumpkins.
But
he's not a real man.
He's not a real
joke.
man. It was a SNL skit. Tom Hanks was the only person who's ever said yes to it. They tried to pitch it for like 4 years during Halloween. I promise this circles back around. There is a thing that is at every Spirit Halloween that is it is a full 2-piece suit covered in jack-o'-lanterns. And they saw this, and it's like the Scream mask, where it had just existed for years and had no origin. And they bought it and were like, we're going to make you a guy. And then the next day after that went live on SNL, they sold out across the country because it was still accessible, but now they had made a character to fit it. And that's exactly what happened with Scream. Those masks sold out.
The
and
first
it was just a generic mask. And the power brand. I love it.
Wasn't Michael Myers' mask like the guy from Star Trek?
The guy from, oh God, he's in the commercials now. He's in the Expedia commercials.
That guy, is that the
people
big
are
man?
Screaming at us right now. Oh, come on. Hold on.
Do you feel like a ghost trying to communicate with the living? William Shatner. It's William Shatner. That's his name.
Not us being able to pull out every other reference. And we're like, who the fuck is William Shatner?
I don't know that guy.
No, he just
He's not relevant to my interest.
Let's get into some of the like little fun facts, bits and bobs, because both these
Yeah.
movies have a lot of them.
Tell me, you're the trivia queen.
So the cast of this movie, obviously, as you were saying, obviously they got a better cast second go around, and then a lot of the original stars, like Neve Campbell, was booked on like 3 different shoots while she was making Scream 2, but obviously it was really important to her to continue to be Sydney. It was, I mean, it's defined her forever. It's
Yeah.
kind of like Courtney Cox in this role too. So she was shooting Party of 5 Mondays and Tuesdays during the day, and then spent Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday on this movie, most of which were night shoots. On Sundays, she would work all night until 6 a.m., go home for 15 minutes, shower all the fake blood off, and immediately go to the Party of 5 set to shoot without sleeping.
Holy shit.
And I just love the idea of a woman who's real tired, just sloshing off a bunch of fake blood in the shower, like, gotta get my bag. This is how we win. This is
how we win. No, that's like, if that doesn't define femininity, you know?
I love her. I just love her. Even her in the horrible wig in the first one, and now her with her real hair in the second one. I love her.
I love wig spotting in films.
Oh,
The Netflix ones are egregious.
we can't. I can't even.
We can't
they're
talk about that.
they're anime adaptation wigs. Deeply upset me.
It really hurts me, actually, to see it.
I know wig making is an art, but I just feel like someone's giving them the wrong direction.
Yeah, I need to talk to whoever's in charge of the
Wig de-
costuming and the hair and makeup and costume, all of it, actually.
Call us.
Yeah,
We'll help.
I just want to talk.
That's it.
I just have some questions.
Another good one.
Oh,
Cast was not
yeah.
informed of the identity of the killer until the last day of principal photography, and did not receive the last 10 pages of the script until it was time to film the final scene. And actually, the killer of Scream 2 did change several times.
Because the script was leaked, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That sucks. How do you deal with that?
But it actually works so well for this really meta movie that deals with what is reality, what is perception of reality, and what is... I feel like they actually might have leaked this themselves, because there was also...
Oh, yeah, the internet.
The internet, and there was also like the usher in the opening scene won an MTV contest
Yeah.
to be in the movie. And so, like, again, it's that layers of media literacy, media consciousness, and reality. So to have it leak, when they even mention in this like Gail's leaked nudes, like feels just like an additional piece of the movie.
Because that wouldn't actually be so far out. Using internet marketing around 1997 or 1998, American Psycho did the same thing. When it was released, you could like access Patrick Bateman's personal website and receive emails from him as a part of the marketing campaign for the film. So this was like present. Like,
how did I not know about that? That's fucking crazy.
We gotta do an American Psycho episode.
We'll just scream the entire time.
Be like, this is literally me.
Also, it's like such a fantastic time for technology and what role it can play in all of the films. This film, the film we're talking about, American Psycho, in that there was still so much fear around it, that everything had a little bit of a nuance and felt very new and discoverable and believable. I think now if a film script leaked, we'd be like, marketing.
Totally. Everything's SpawnCon.
Everything's SpawnCon. We
yeah.
wouldn't believe it, but people lost their fucking shit
Yeah.
when this leaked.
And that kind of intentionality around the internet as well. And seeing a film is not just like, oh, well, it's a cool movie, so I'm going to go see it. But as like the result of this, whole rendered campaign of influence, like culturally and emotionally and through marketing. I'm sure it already existed, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that, the 20th century was naive in any way about the potential of marketing, but it just wasn't. I think you're completely right. It wasn't as present in the public consciousness.
And we just had less access to information.
Yeah.
I think our parents still believed the news, and we're like, oh, well, someone owns this corporation that's giving us a really filtered amount of information, and we're just a little bit more skeptical, and we have more media literacy.
Yeah.
One last note in trivia is the man who wrote the screenplay, Kevin Williamson, kept leaving little notes in the script because there were weird things. Wes is apparently a very eccentric guy, which should not really shock
Love
anyone.
that.
But
as he should be.
they worked really well together, and they worked several times throughout both of their careers. But he would just make a little note in the margins of certain pages that was like, Wes Craven will make this scary and just move on.
He will.
Like, he'll figure it out. I don't need to write it. He'll figure it out.
I like that amount of trust in him.
They really got along. They worked together several
Yeah, they
times.
worked together quite a lot.
Mhm.
Several screams. They screamed quite a bit.
They screamed.
So, on that note, Scream 2.
You
Scream
can
2.
only die once. After that, nothing and nobody can harm you.
The film stars Neve Campbell reprising her role from the first Scream as Sidney Prescott. Following the massacre in her hometown, she's off to college, but she's still haunted by memories of Ghostface, who were her boyfriend Billy and his friend Stu, who were killed at the end of the first film. Not helping things is that a slasher film based directly on the Ghostface murders called Stab is released nationwide, and a copycat killer has taken on the mantle of Ghostface and starts targeting Sydney's college campus.
And we immediately open with kind of that same little vignette style that we'd opened Scream 1 with, where we have an exceptionally famous person who something happens to. And for this specifically, we have Jada Pinkett Smith. Jada Pinkett Smith. I want to say Pickett. Jada
Pinkett.
It's Jada. And she is playing Maureen Evans. And her and her boyfriend Phil are watching Stab. And they're going into the theater.
Yeah, and something that's also interesting about this opening is that they do reference like the role that specifically Black people play in horror, and the well-known trope of like Black guy dies first, but then a Black guy does die first. So I'm kind of wondering what the point of was with that, or maybe it could be the beginning of what we see throughout the film, where it's like your knowledge, and we saw in the first film as well, your knowledge of horror movies and awareness of it will not protect you from an actual murderer.
It actually seems like in this one, not only will it not protect you, but it actually might make you be punished harder or punished first.
Yeah.
Any truth teller in this gets annihilated pretty quickly.
Yeah, because you're not smarter. You might be aware, but the killer is just as aware as you are of these horror tropes and these rules. So it's more just like, how fast can you run?
Between Phil and Maureen, I don't like Phil.
I hate that guy. He's so rude.
He's so mean to her.
He's gross. And
she's fabulous.
I had a note, I hate this nasty man, die.
And he does have the gnarliest.
It's horrible. Oh, yeah, and his death. It's quite eerie, and he gets stabbed in the head from a bathroom stall. He gets very close to this bathroom stall because he hears this very eerie, like, whispering coming from it, like, oh, I'm sorry, my mic.
It's so eerie. We're going to punch the mic.
It's like, I'm sorry that I didn't mean to kill him. It was like really
I thought you were going to do ASMR on the mic
to be like, sorry, I'm sorry that I killed them.
It's kind of what it sounds like in the movie.
Wait, can I do that too? You hear that? Anyway,
So he's listening to 1990s ASMR in the bathroom stall.
There's this super creepy voice of this like babyish like whispering, and it's actually a reference to Black Christmas, where we never see the identity of the killer, we never learn his name, but you only hear his like very creepy like mumbling over the phone.
Which is also perfect because when he walks into the bathroom, both of the urinals are occupied by Ghostface.
Mm-hmm.
So when you turn around this corner, it's the first time you're introduced to something that you are not only not familiar with, but is entirely new for the franchise, which is actually a very old reference.
Yeah. Great call out. Yeah.
So we watch Phil die. Ghostface walks into the theater. We realize the audience knows before Maureen knows what's about to happen. We know this is not Phil. Maureen dies in a way that I think really helps lay on the meta layer thick. She gets stabbed. She walks to the front of the theater, and this audience all believes this is a really intense fan or some kind of paid for dramatization. And they watch
like a marketing
stunt.
Oh my god!
And they watch her die in front of them as Nick Cave's red hand plays loudly because we've licensed this track and we're gonna play it in every fucking movie forever.
Get your money, Nick Cave.
Nick Cave,
He's rolling.
This bought him a boat. This had to have. That's conjecture. But
that's him buying fine velvet for his wife to make beautiful dresses.
Oh, true. Why has she not made red gloves yet? You feel like that would really.
She has to.
Vampire's wife has to. Nick Cave's wife has a brand.
It's really beautiful.
It's gorgeous.
Really beautiful, like goth prairie dresses.
But that level of self-awareness helps us carry over into our intro of Sydney.
Mm-hmm.
And Sydney is in college. She has a cute little short haircut, as you do early on in college. You're like, fuck it, cut all my hair off.
She got a fuck-ass bob.
She has a fuck-ass bob.
And a great suede jacket.
Great suede jacket.
Love 90s autumn.
She wakes up. She tossles out of bed to a phone call. We immediately hear, "Hello, Sydney," in the Ghostface voice.
What's your favorite scary movie?
What's your favorite scary movie? Completely apathetic to what's happening. She looks at her phone. She has caller ID, calls the guy by his first name, notifies him of the piece of legislation that states that prank phone calls are illegal. The guy's like, "Oh, no, fuck." And she hangs up and then carries on.
Caller ID, bitch.
Caller ID, bitch.
It's a new movie. It's like, you know, the rules are changing. And I think that's like, I don't know. It's such a well-constructed film that, like, from the get-go, we're already breaking from the format and establishing a new one, like Star 69. Get the fuck out of here. People have cell phones,
which changes the whole dynamic because, and I mean, Wes knows this, and obviously, legend and horror have to change so much when you have immediate access to perceivably anyone at any given time, and to watch myth modernize, which I think this, at least in my mind, is the first film to actually see that, is mind-blowing. Like I cheered when I first watched this. I was like, oh my god, I was
Welcome to 1997.
Yeah.
You can't do When a Stranger Calls now. What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
No one has still figured out how texting plays a role in horror, but that's fine.
I think that we haven't figured out how to use phones in any, like, the nightmare rectangle in any meaningful way in media. It's always like very awkward. And I'd say in films and in literature as well. I'm just not, at least in a horror way. I mean, there's one missed call, which isn't bad.
Even in literature, I think that's a great call. When you kind of have like a text conversation listed, something about it just doesn't feel quite right. You're right. I don't know if anyone has nailed this.
Yeah, so we're back with Sydney, and we realize that she has become a public figure, and this is the introduction of an interesting line of ethics around true crime. And like being the survivor of a horrible event, and that event has become a spectacle to be consumed. And we'll get back to this throughout, but this is like the first introduction where Sydney is specifically being targeted by pranks, like because Stab is coming out, because she actually lived through it. And in the next scene, when we get to this film analysis class, we reunite with Randy, and he also emphasizes like the violence, like I lived through this violence that everyone claims is a spectacle.
And they're trying, even in this class, they're trying to unpack the ethics of the role that Stab plays in the murder, and also what that means for subsequent media. They start talking about like even violence in The Godfather.
Yes.
And Sarah Michelle Gellar is introduced in this scene. SCC. And it's not a very long-lived role, but it's also kind of we're pulling out those original Scream queens, or just famous women that we feel like can occupy a role where you would like to believe they won't die.
She's famous. She's beautiful. Like we can't kill her off
kill
because she
her.
costs so much money for us to get into the movie, and
that's what condemns them. But they start having this conversation, and Randy gets to pull the "I lived through it" card, and then everyone just shuts the fuck up because he's like, "Yeah, I was shot," and everyone's like, "All right, you can talk." And then he proceeds to have the Stab 2. Oh God, sequels are horrible, and they all laugh, and we're all like, "Oh my God, they're saying what I'm saying."
it turns into his private improv routine, like for the entire class, as the professor just looks on placidly.
And they like spin towels, and they're all sitting at these tiny desks that no college student have, but they have like the little thing under it for your book bag. Like they're not 12. Where did they get these props?
In our college, we barely had chairs. They just made us stand around and go into the woods.
Literally. Yeah. There's no, regardless, he goes off on this whole thing. We're all really excited. Randy's back, and Randy and Sid reunite at the end of the scene to talk about the fact that these murders are happening again and what that might mean for them. The only thing I really hate about this scene, because I love Randy, but I actually really love him in the first movie. In the second movie, he makes me a little upset. I think they just gave him more leash to run with, and I think he hangs himself in that you might not know exactly what I'm talking about, but if not, everyone should watch this. You know, when they meet again, and for no explainable reason, he has a full British accent for like 30 seconds, and he's like,
was it like a Jude Law impression?
But why? They don't talk about Jude Law. There's no context for the like, oh, and then they're coming back and we're all getting married again, and you're like,
It's coming back, bud.
It's like, Randy, why are you talking to Sydney like this? And Sydney doesn't care because then her new
It's just
sexy
Randy. Yeah.
her new sexy boyfriend comes by and we realize that she now has a hot man named Derek, who I think, honestly, and we can talk about this in a little bit, I think he is a precursor for the character of Ken and Barbie.
You think so? Just like a useless man.
A man that is meant to just be a mirror and an exact symbol of he's like a representation of a boyfriend.
Yeah.
And they do this a few times, but
He is strangely flat and
but
vague.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Does all
He's
the
a
perfect
doctor.
things. He's
Yeah.
a doctor. Whatever you need, Sydney. I find their relationship, and no one ever really talks about it, and I don't know if it's just because we have Barbie in the zeitgeist right now. I can be like, Wes was doing something. I think so. So we meet Derek, we meet Randy again, and we're all very happy he's alive and well and they're still friends.
Sydney's roommate, Hallie.
We're kind of piecing together the little squad. And as things begin to heighten, we also are introduced to Gail, who's back.
Gail Weathers is back
Gail
with
Weathers
a fuck-ass bob.
With another fuck-ass bob. They
and
give
this
her...
weird, like, Fred highlight. I hated her look in this film, actually. I thought she was really beautiful in the first one, and this one kind of got weird.
Do you think there's a reason they always give her a weird-ass haircut? Because in the third one, doesn't she have the tiny baby bangs
Does
that
she?
everyone fucking hates? They fuck with this woman's hair.
Yeah. Why?
Maybe to show like what fame does over because like she is dressed very differently. She has
Yeah.
more polish. She's wearing more makeup. We're supposed to show that Gail has not only sold her
Her
book,
arms are more toned.
but also auctioned now a film. And so when Gail's introduced and we see her interacting with the local media, she has this certain status where she interrupts the police commissioner and she kind of breaks this, and everyone treats her very, very differently. So maybe the red weird ass zebra highlights are a way to signify that she is more successful.
She's New Gail.
New Gail.
New Gail.
So when Gail comes back to kind of ask the college about the murders, we simultaneously are kind of running parallel plot lines. We have Gail, who's also reignited with Dewey.
But they separated. They broke up for reasons they don't quite go into, except that Dewey is mad at her because of how she represented him in her book about the Woodsboro murders.
She calls him the
A
old
doofus or something like
Barney
that. Barney Fife.
Barney Fife. Barney Fife-ish in his boys.
She basically calls him retarded.
Which he is like a heart of gold character, and he now has. David Arquette has this funny little limp now that is like it changes because if you notice he switches
He
arms.
does. Yeah, it's kind of inconsistent.
Which I
He's
think
doing
must
a
be a
dance.
bit.
Yeah.
It must be a bit. They also, random tidbit, not only were they married during this, but the police commissioner in this film is her father-in-law. It's David's dad, which is just keep it in the family.
That's cute. I like that.
Yeah, it's a wholesome as hell. So that's happening. We're witnessing kind of what the adults, quote unquote, are doing. Simultaneously, Sydney is rushing because that's what girls do, right?
She doesn't seem like a girl who would be in a sorority, though. I mean, do you have to join a sorority we didn't go to a traditional college, so we didn't have sororities.
No, I don't know anything about other than what my sisters have told me, but apparently the hard thing is you only get invited to the parties and get to hang out if you're in a sorority. But you're right, Sydney doesn't seem to want to run, but Hallie really wants to run, her roommate, and she's kind of utilizing Sydney as social currency because Portia de Rossi and Rebecca Gayheart are the bitchy sorority sisters who really want Sydney for her prestige.
I don't think they were that bitchy, actually.
They were actually really nice, but I think it was
A bit underhanded, maybe.
transactional.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, okay, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I don't think they were I would not describe them as hostile towards her, but they definitely, you're totally right. They wanted her for her prestige and like the visibility that she had.
And again, that also really gets into the conversation of what it means to be a survivor, and also what role true crime plays in this. Like, why is Sydney desirable? Because she lived through a tragedy. What does that mean for her trauma, and what does that mean for the way in which she can be weaponized for social clout?
Yeah.
Which I think Hallie grapples with a lot.
Mm-hmm. And that makes me, the fact that Scream 2 is even bringing up these questions makes me think of just, how there's this somber cloud over the film that gives it such like an emotionally complex dimension. that you don't find in most slashers. And I think that's really kind of what like the fact that it's confronting that, like her survival's guilt, and it doesn't seem like she's coping that well. Like she just wants to kind of, I think even seeing pointing out the emptiness of Derek and this kind of transactional nature of all her relationships shows she hasn't really recovered.
She seems really jaded. Gail seems like she's coping through fame. And then Dewey and Randy both seem kind of like collateral, like not almost like collateral damage.
Yeah.
Like they can only exist in their trope, or like almost in the past of what they were. Even Randy constantly bringing up, I'm the survivor.
Yeah, I lived through this.
And then Dewey showing up to be like, I'm gonna solve this murder, even though he really
I'm gonna be the hero.
I'm gonna be the hero. He's not on this police force anymore. He's just like a guy.
He's just around.
That showed up.
Getting his residuals.
And so, no, I think you're exactly right. And this also allows us to start having that conversation of layers of reality, which I mentioned earlier too, where Gail and Dewey are talking about even, the book that was published. Then they reference a fake nude that leaked of Gail that had another person's body on top of it. It was Jennifer Aniston's body that Gail was on top of, which is funny because it's a callback to Friends, which is very cute.
And the fact that, it's funny even now in retrospect because Jennifer Aniston got body replaced in one of her movies that she filmed, Meet the Millers or something like that, and it was just straight up a different woman's body.
So we've set the stage. All our players are playing. We understand kind of the stakes of sorority life and are brought to a sorority house and get to witness our second murder of the film.
Yeah. Cece, she's watching TV and we can see her flipping through channels absentmindedly, and it's all this news footage of scenes of violence and actual deaths or crimes being committed. So again, just kind of shifting back and forth between media representations of violence that the film is confronting so continually.
Cece's watching all of this content, all this really violent media. She gets a call, and she is sober sister. For those of you that didn't go to college or did not go to this kind of college, they leave one stray person behind in the house in case someone gets drunk to go pick them up. She's sober sister. She gets a call, and we start to kind of go into the original Scream, but also we have these little layers of Black Christmas. When an individual is left alone in a sorority home, we also obviously have Sorority Row. And the person, this is just a little fun tidbit, the person that calls, that a woman calls through, and it's Selma Blair, who did Cruel Intentions.
Oh yeah, Selma.
with her. And Selma was actually supposed to be one of the characters. I think it might have been Sydney's roommate, actually, and couldn't make it work. So they wanted to have a little ode.
She and Nev Campbell kind of look like each other, too. So I would have been confused if they had been cast.
I think that was kind of the point.
Yeah.
I think it was someone who was really well-adjusted and someone who wasn't well-adjusted to college life. And that was what they were trying to show. Very, very sad. Might have been
sad. Poor Sydney. I feel so sad for Sydney.
By the time you get further through the franchise, you're just like, oh my God, let this woman just be done.
Free her. Yeah.
I was really hoping she would have a Saw franchise arc where she just became Ghostface.
No, Sydney, no.
Spoiler, to my knowledge, doesn't happen.
After the death of Cece, and I did want to call out that you had noted that Cece basically followed all the rules of what she had to do, and she still died.
She, it's kind of that everyone says, you're supposed to be running out the front door, but they're running up the stairs. She follows everything that you would scream at a TV and still is sacrificed.
She calls the campus security immediately, and then, she gets stabbed and then thrown off the roof of the sorority house, essentially. And again, all the whole run through the sorority house, another reference back to Black Christmas, she basically dying in the attic. And then, after this first death, obviously the campus is shocked, and Ghostface is basically out in the open. He targets Sydney directly next. And something I wanted to note is that this Ghostface isn't very nimble. He's tripping over shit constantly and missing his stabs. It just made me think body language and constitution is such an iconic part of a masked killer. We identify them by their masks and their costumes, but it's also how they move.
Absolutely. I mean, you even think about the slow walk in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which has become so iconic.
And the chainsaw spin, too, where it's this kind of animal instinct almost taking over.
And Ghostface has always been human and clumsy. He was like this in the first movie.
Really? Okay.
But people talk about this all the time in particular because it is always a new killer. who's unexperienced. So you're supposed to feel like this could be anyone. That's why they do trip. That's why they stumble. That's why they get really fucked up.
Oh, I love that. Okay, great call out. Yeah, so Ghostface is out in the open, tagging, like basically stabbing people down. Randy is next.
Randy's after
which
Sydney's
is pretty shocking.
After Sydney's targeted and has a scare, Randy's next. And we have this, I feel like they kill him so quick.
It's so fast. And it's really shocking. And that's probably the point. We have an introduction. So this Ghostface can use cell phones. And then Randy's running across college campus, basically grabbing every single cell phone that he's finding because anybody could be Ghostface. And then he gets pulled into Gail's news van and stabbed to death.
Everyone, justice for Randy has remained to be a thing up to this point. But Gail and Dewey and Randy, who are all running around on the campus trying to figure out who this call is coming from, Gail and Dewey are left completely shocked. Randy is, that's kind of it. And then we almost don't even pause and are just thrown into like a lunchroom scene. Like his death is really brushed over.
Yeah, it's Sydney gets targeted in it like on the computer as well. So we have basically two scenes back to back of Killface.
Killface. I love him. Killface is our man.
We have two scenes back to back of Ghostface using this new technology basically to terrorize the survivors of Woodsboro. Sydney is targeted by the computer, and then there's this very weird scene where her lover, Derek, sings to her in the middle of a lunchroom, and everyone's clapping, and I'm really upset everybody was clapping because they're encouraging him. And apparently the scene where he just starts singing on the table is so integral to the character that the actors who tried out for the role had to sing it.
That was their audition.
But
I also, I've always wondered if this scene was meant to be like, oh, he's so unsettling, he must be the killer. Or
this man is empty.
Yeah.
We don't know shit about him.
But you never really do. He has another line. So after he does this whole thing, he gives her his class ring. It's weird and uncomfortable.
Yeah. And apparently that's a bad thing to do. I don't know shit about
cursed objects,
big time schools
of sorority life. I don't know.
Apparently
he gets punished for it, I guess.
Yeah,
allegedly.
They're mad, allegedly,
and breaks a rule of college life, which is funny when you also parallel that to like rules of horror, the kind of do's and don'ts, and everyone's operating in this binary. But then at the end of this, Sydney is starting to be suspicious, rightfully so, of Derek because I think she's afraid of anyone getting close to her.
And the fact the last Ghostface was her boyfriend. Yeah.
1,000%. And unlike Billy, her last boyfriend, Derek has this, is constantly like, I'm supposed to be understanding, I guess, so I'll leave. But he's earnest.
You should
it's
leave.
not affectatious. He's like, I'm supposed to be this thing. And he is this weird void vessel. And that's what I'm saying. I think he operates in the way that you would like 100% expect a normal functioning person to operate in this role. I think he was well cast and really bizarrely written, but
this large marble slab of a man.
Underrated. I actually think he has a totally underrated performance.
Yeah, and so Ghostface then basically targets Gail and Dewey next. And there's this great scene where, again, another layer of watching yourself, watching your trauma. They're basically playing Gail's news footage inside a lecture hall in the college.
While they're smooching.
While they're kissing. And yeah, they're watching footage of themselves and then they start having sex, which I think is...
More layers of media
which
and
is
reality
great.
and comprehension because they can't, like these two people can't exist or have a relationship in the real world. They almost have to watch the media of themselves or talk about the fictional characters of themselves in order to actually want to be together. I don't know. There's something profound there, but it's too big for me to tackle.
We'll figure it out one day. Dewey dies. Basically, they get chased around by Ghostface, and Dewey gets stabbed, and Gail can only watch through a screen, like a literal glass pane, separating them.
Soundproof glass. What does it mean?
Really makes you think.
Gail escapes like she always does, and runs out, and then we really quickly jump into our final set piece, actually, which is the Sydney's drama hall, because if she wasn't tortured enough as just a woman in the world, she has decided to pursue an acting career.
Yeah, and the play that they are putting on, she plays Cassandra, a figure blessed with foresight, cursed to never be believed. And I think that ties so well to Scream 2's themes also of intuition and like the gift of fear in general to kind of like warn you about people and protect you. On that note, so Cotton, is his name Cotton Weary?
His name's Cotton Weary.
Cotton, this sounds like a slave owner from like
Jesus.
the middle, from like the 1800s. Like,
Yeah,
like-
why is his... I think because so Cotton Weary in the first one was the alleged killer. Sydney has had accused of killing her mother. It was an accident. He now makes a very small kind of reprisal in this film at the beginning as really being the focus of Gail's book, because Gail wrote a whole book about him that became Stab 2. So he's like trying to figure out what his role in this story is, despite the fact he never had a role in the story.
He never did. Yeah, he's irrelevant now, but he feels like he deserves a role because he had a role first, and the role was taken, or the role was wrong, where he was accused of murder, and then he had to do time in prison, which he says like 12 times throughout the film. And so he's just kind of stalking the periphery of the narrative, like confronting Sydney and like demanding that she do an interview with Barbara Walters with him. Like, this is his big thing. Like, you have to do the Barbara Walters interview. And because he sees this as basically being a way for Sydney to repay, you know, the deep damage apparently she did to his life and to his reputation by naming him as the original murderer of her mother. And something I really appreciate about his presence in the film, actually, and this will be quick, I promise, is that they position him as this predatory jerk. And just because a man isn't a serial killer doesn't mean he isn't dangerous. And a predator is not just a masked killer, but in most cases, someone that you know. And which is something that Dewey says earlier in the film to Sydney. Like, if there's a psychopathic freak going around, he's likely somebody already in your life.
So I'm going to actually, to this point, because I think that's an amazing point and I want to speak to it, I'm going to quickly unpack the last couple, basically how this ends, and then I'm going to call back to this. So we find out a random side character is the killer. Mickey, who we haven't even introduced, because he's just like a man, which I actually think was intended, it was intended that way. Could be anybody.
Could be anyone.
But he found, he was obsessed with the Scream story, the Stab story, found someone on an internet forum to partner with.
Who did he find online?
Billy Loomis's mother.
Nancy Loomis?
Nancy Loomis,
Local woman.
Local news reporter Nancy Loomis.
Debbie Chalk, a.k.a. Nancy Loomis. AKA
Debbie
local
Chalk.
woman.
Local woman.
Local woman.
Which is obviously a callback. All of these killers have a complicated relationship with their mother, whether you think about Halloween, whether you think about Friday the 13th, whether you think about Sleepaway Camp. I mean, all of these.
The aunt, the weird aunt.
The weird aunt mom. Mother's sons killers always have a weird dynamic, so this obviously makes a ton of sense.
We talk about Mickey's motivation.
No, go ahead.
So Mickey's motivation was this kind of convoluted, basically preparing already for the spectacle that would arise from the murders, where he was like, my alibi is like, or no, his like reasoning is his motive. Thank you. I didn't go to law school.
They talk about motives a lot.
Motive.
In this movie.
Yeah. His motive is like airtight. Airtight. Yeah. Because it's like he's going to blame violence on the media, and then as basically his main motivator, of like it kind of drove him insane and influenced him, and he's not responsible for his own actions because it was the media's to blame. And again, this was a conversation happening in the late 90s about the influence of violence in the media to violence in true actions. And in response, he gets shot.
He gets shot.
Yeah.
By Debbie Chalk.
Debbie Chalk.
And so this is where I want to have this conversation, speaking back to what you were saying about predators being not just the guy with the mask, but could be kind of hidden in plain sight or hidden in your life. So we have this showdown, and it is Courtney Cox's character.
Gail Weathers.
Yes, we have Gail Weathers.
Because it's a pun.
Oh my God. We have Gail Weathers, because it's a pun. We have Mrs. Loomis, and we have Sydney all having a showdown on this stage. And at this point, we have killed Mickey. We have killed Phil. We've killed Randy. We've killed off all these men.
Yeah, all the men died.
And
Derek's dead.
He
got shot by Mickey.
He got shot. We have this I actually think this film is having a weirder conversation about gender than it should, because even like Gail Weathers is Cotton's only ability to access fame. Randy's only ability is really kind of through Sydney. Like
yeah,
all
and
of
his unrequited love for her.
his unrequited love for her, and then even Derek, who gets killed and is this weird shell of a man, is only exists in the context of Sydney. Like there's a really, and even Phil dying at the beginning, Maureen only being present at that film because Phil insisted she go.
Yeah, she wanted to see a Sandra Bullock movie.
She wanted to see a Sandra Bullock movie. It's all of these men kind of screw over every woman they're all predatory. All of the men aside from Dewey are kind of predatory, which is also why we let Dewey live.
Dewey lives. Oh yeah, Dewey's alive, by the way. He didn't actually die. No, I've been thinking and like misandrist media, like, but it's written by men, but it depicting men in an extremely negative light. I also picked this up a lot in urban legend, where again every man is a piece of shit, and I'm like, do you find this to be an acceptable representation of yourself? Like, do you think it's just how men are? Like, I don't know, because as a woman it's repulsive.
Well, I think Wes is trying to shine a light on it in that we're down to our final scene. Gail's pushed into a pit. We have Sydney, Mrs. Loomis, Cotton finally comes onto stage and is like, hey, basically makes a bargain with Sydney and is like,
if part's so fucked up.
If you'll take this interview with me, I will let you live. He shoots Mrs. Loomis.
Mm-hmm.
They walk off together. Sydney is immediately flooded with paparazzi trying to get the story. She says, actually, Cotton was the hero. Everyone go talk to Cotton. And that is really, aside from the fact that we see Dewey alive and Gail goes with him to the hospital, that's how the film ends.
Yeah. Yeah, she's basically like, if you want the fucking story, go ahead and have it. And then we have this vibrant soft rock starts playing, and then there's that like famous like pan out shot of Sydney walking alone through the campus. All of her friends are dead, and it feels a bit discordant because you want to feel it as it's a victorious moment where it's like, you survived again, Sydney, or like a relief, but it's like, no, it's that like sad and somber attitude and that like emotional dimension that the Scream franchise overall brings to slashers about the cost of enduring something so horrible, and that even though you survived, it's like you didn't get out unscathed. Like you never really escaped. And to that one last crane shot you're talking about, which is like that big money thing you do in a second film. Oh, it kind of looks we got money now.
We got money.
Yeah.
It kind of gives the illusion that they're all in this dollhouse, or they're all on this stage that is Wes's world. Like they went from that small stage that they literally had the entire last act on to this campus where we are zooming out watching Sydney alone walk her solitary path into Scream 3. And that's where it ends.
But yeah, Scream 2, good movie, bad movie.
It's a great movie.
It's a great movie. I think it's a more than worthy successor to the original Scream. It still continues to expand on the format, expand on the genre itself.
I actually think it takes a much more serious stance than the first movie does, but you really have to think about it.
Yeah.
It's more subtle, but I think it's actually more nuanced. It's a great movie. It's one of my favorite movies.
So, do you want to take us through Urban Legend?
Urban Legend. All right. So this was a slasher film directed by Jamie Blanks.
Who?
Jamie Blanks. It's also such a funny name because like Wes Craven is like such a spooky sounding name. And then we have Jamie Blank.
Yeah, Jamie Blanks literally sounds like it's like Adam Smithy or whatever.
John
like,
Doe.
Like a
Jamie
fake
Blank.
person. Yeah.
It's not a real human.
Yeah.
Jamie Blank, who
Blanks.
Blanks.
Whatever.
Whatever.
He doesn't exist.
It doesn't
He's
exist.
a fake person.
Fake first name. Was so directed by Jamie Blanks. Urban Legend was released in 1998, which is a year after Scream 2, 2 years after Scream 1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jamie Blanks wanted to direct I Know What You Did Last Summer, which was written by Kevin Williamson, writer of Scream and Scream 2, but was given this instead. So,
What do you like? Wait, just was like, actually take this.
It was, yeah. Well, because I Know What You Did Last Summer already had a director assigned to it. And so they were like, here, you want this knockoff? And even when it came out, people were like, okay, this is a Scream knockoff.
But I will say,
I did quite well.
I do think Jamie like put his whole little heart into this.
He tried his damn best.
I actually wonder, this is such a hot take, I wonder if I Know What You Did Last Summer would have been more enjoyable had he touched it, because this is a very fun movie.
It has a lot of style, actually. I like the performances. I mean, and speaking of performances, the lead actress, Alicia Witt, was among the final 3 actresses being considered for the role of Sidney Prescott in Scream.
There's so much industry
It's so
incest in this.
incestuous.
Yeah, for sure.
Damon in this film was in the film class in Scream 2. It's like there's some egregious impressions of people from Scream in Urban Legend.
And Rebecca Gayheart's also in both films.
Rebecca Gayheart.
That's just-
Sarah Michelle Gellar was supposed to be in this film in the role of Sasha, but had to back out due to conflicts with Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Which was probably in her best interest.
Also in the film, Alicia Witt, Jared Leto, Rebecca Gayheart. We have some smaller roles played by Robert Englund, Tara Reid, and Brad Dourif, who is the role of Chucky, who voiced Chucky in Child's Play. So on that note, let's roll.
Let's roll. All right.
You can only die once. After that, nothing and nobody can harm you.
So we open basically right on our first murder scene in a classic horror film way, where we're watching a young woman driving down a stormy road at night.
And obviously Blanks was very inspired by that kind of initial vignette that happens in Scream. So that's kind of what this is. We are immediately introduced to the film Urban Legend with, I would say, arguably the most famous urban legend.
Oh yeah,
Car hook?
No, this isn't car hook. Car door.
It's the look behind you one, which I will say.
Yeah. Oh, the high beams. Oh yeah.
I forever in high school would check the back seats of my car.
Oh yeah, people still do check the back seats of the car, like since hearing about that story. So for those of you who, I don't know, were born in a bunker and just rejoined society recently.
Hi, bunker people.
Hello.
Thanks for
welcome.
joining us today.
I'm so happy you're tuning in. How are you reacclimating? We see our first victim is basically word for word the victim of of a very well-known urban legend, where a young woman is driving at night and she sees the driver behind her is flashing their high beams, and this makes her quite nervous. And so when she finally gets home and pulls in, she realizes that there was a murderer in the back of her car who every time he tried to get up and stab her, the driver behind her would flash the high beams. Unfortunately, our first victim does not have a good Samaritan to protect her, just a creepy gas station attendant who she attacks and runs from.
So someone's flashing their high beam. She pulls into this gas station, try to figure out what the deal is. The guy who tries to help her is like slightly deformed.
Brad Dourif.
Yeah.
He played Wormtongue in Lord of the Rings.
He's just a little odd looking, but he's very
He has
sweet.
a stutter, and because of his stutter, he can't tell her there's someone in the back of her car.
So she panics at this gas station, gets in her car, hoofs it, taking off. On the radio, you hear, "Turn around." And everyone is screaming at their TV, which I think is what he was hoping for. That's kind of what you have in the first and second Scream. And so I think Jamie Blanks was like, this is my you're screaming at your TV moment.
Yeah, like, get the fuck out of
Get
there,
the
bitch.
Basically, this woman immediately gets axed. Her name is Michelle, and then we are immediately thrown onto our college campus, much like Scream 2.
With Natalie Simon, Brenda Bates, Damon Brooks, and Paul Gardner. And they're just kind of characters in this unfolding mystery. They don't... everybody at this college campus is obsessed with urban legends. They only talk about urban legends.
No, they talk about sex also.
And they talk about sex. And sexy urban legends.
I think the only conversations that take place in this movie are the urban legends or the, like... So one of the characters that is a reoccurring character is Tara Reid.
Tara Reid. Oh, and she's wonderful in it. She has great shoes.
She has great shoes. She also did all her own stunts, which I think is funny because it's Tara Reid. And she has this kind of radio show that is prevalent not only in the first scene but throughout it, and she basically is just like a horny Cosmo style line, and that is what brings us into the friend group. They're all talking about her horny radio show.
Yeah, and it's very... does that happen on college campuses? I don't know. Do they let that happen? This is a very free love campus. Like a lot of semen conversations.
A lot of open doors. A lot of we're all cool with it. And all the professors are from 1940. But everyone else is actively...
They're all wearing tweed jackets.
But everyone else is actively living in the 90s.
And the only class offered at this college is one about urban legends.
Or the paper.
The paper! I forgot about the paper. Yeah, Jared Leto's stalking the parameter as a paper boy.
Jared Leto, in his first role, which he now, as an adult man, pretends to not know it existed.
We know.
In interviews,
We saw him.
He acts like he has no awareness of this film. It's hilarious. You should Google it. I watched 2 interviews where like, tell us about your first movie, and he's like, I don't know what you're talking. He is the lovable psychotic student who wants to get this student Pulitzer. So we basically set up the dynamic where every other character, frankly, is very unserious, aside from our 2 leads, who is Jared Leto, and I don't know his normal name. And then
Paul. His name's Paul. Yeah, because I kept calling him Dean, because when they referenced the Dean, I was like,
Dean.
that's Dean.
No, they have crazy names that are really hard to remember. Natalie is our main character, played by Alicia Witt. So Natalie and Paul. We'll focus on those 2.
And Rebecca Gayheart, who plays
Brenda.
Natalie's best friend, Brenda.
Everyone else is just kind of a person in the world. So we
get pretty quickly into our next kill. Sadly not hand car, hook door car hand, but it's a close one where Damon, after coming on to our beautiful and virginal redhead Natalie in her beautiful suede jacket,
another suede jacket,
he gets, and I'm not sure how this urban legend exactly works, but basically he gets hung from a tree.
Oh, so this actually, okay, so I'll give you the mini urban legend. It's kind of confusing.
I had never heard of this one, actually.
You've never heard of car hook?
No. The hanging where the feet on the top of the car.
Oh, where it's this, because they combine the 2 urban legends in this.
Really?
Because this is like a weird half combo of both. Here's what it is. At least from what I've been told. And again, this is urban legends. This is the fun part. This is what goes around. You kind of hear it. So it's a make-out point, essentially. There is 2 people and they're hooking up, and the one guy goes to pee or something, and the woman is hearing scraping on the side of the car, and it's the murderer trying to scare her. Yeah. So he's just scraping his hook across the back doors, and she's like, "It's
nasty and horrible."
And the guy comes back and he's like, "Oh, it's branches, and they hear it on the top, and they're like, "It's branches," but it's literally the guy on the top trying to figure out how to get into the car. So that's how this happens. Because that's how the car. So basically, he hooks himself under the bed of the truck in the urban legend, and they take off, and that's why the only thing left is the hook, because he was basically trying to wait till something happened where he could get in, but instead they drive off and his hook comes off his hand.
Yeah, because he has a hook. Yeah.
In case we didn't say it, there's a hook involved. There's some hook for a hand. But anyway, so that's why they're doing
Damon gets tied to a tree, and when Alicia starts the car, it hangs him because the killer tied the rope to the
killer's making a Rube Goldberg machine of murder and somehow figured out how to perfectly rig this so that
really fast too. This murderer is really fast.
Total, and that's the difference. This murder is really fast, really swift, makes no mistakes, which is so different than what we have in Scream, which is this bumbling idiot killer that you're like
falling over a couch and
getting up and running and being Ghostface. This murderer in their puffy winter jacket just does everything.
They work
swiftly,
slow and precise.
And they're not cold or hot at all. They're perfect in their puffy winter jacket
in like September.
Damon is hung. She sees him hanging because she thinks he's dead.
She sees him hanging, but then when she goes back, the body's gone.
She goes to get the college campus cop. Yeah. They go back. Body's gone.
Reese is great. Reese is a great character.
Reese is a great character. And again, playing with media in a really specific way. We see Reese watching kind of like these old, they were like blaxploitation cop movies. And trying to...
Yeah, she's watching Foxy Brown.
I thought she was watching Coffee.
She's watching Coffee. You're right. She's watching Coffee.
She's watching Coffee, and we get to see this woman like try to emulate a character, which is again funny because we're talking about like radio and cell phones and film and media. So just adding to that. But they go back, there's no murderer, and then Natalie, really distressed, goes back to this like weird coffee shop where all her and her friends hang out. And it's like
the Friends coffee shop.
It's literally the Friends
literally
coffee shop.
Friends coffee
she
shop.
has a I know what I saw moment, and they're all like, no.
He's in Aspen skiing. Yeah.
She tries to tell him she saw Damon die. Everyone's like, no, he's in Aspen skiing or he's at a bachelor party. And Brenda does her best Rose McGowan impression, essentially, with the like, no, please don't kill me, Mr. Ghostface.
Oh my God, you're right.
That
egregious.
Rebecca Gayheart, I love her, but she's just trying to give Rose this whole movie.
Yeah. And then the other guy who I keep calling Stu Light because he's just Stu from Scream, like.
but less likable.
Less likable. He's very mean.
I
Stu,
mean,
love
Stu is
real
murderer,
Stu, but
No, real Stu's like, can't fuck with him. He's my worst would. I love Stu.
I loved him too. I don't know, something about that. And you see this with the guys in Scream. They remind me of my older sister is 12 years older than me. So she, during the 90s, that was like, she was in high school, and all of her boyfriends, that phenotype of like the kind of lanky goatee man, Trent from Daria, that like imprinted on my brain like I was a baby bird. And whenever I see them now, I'm just like, oh.
Smell like a pack of Marlboros.
You smell like a pack of Marlboros.
Still have Blockbuster movies.
Yeah.
And then we get to what I think is probably the most punishing murder
Horrible.
in the film. But okay, one thing I do think is funny is Jamie Blanks is trying so hard to get audience reactions throughout this entire movie that Brenda has a quick throwaway line where they're talking, Jared Leto's coming back because he's covering all of this news like he's a legit reporter. He's like the Gale Weathers of our movie, but he's getting a student Pulitzer.
Oh my God, he is.
I know.
He needs to get a student Pulitzer.
He must get a student Pulitzer. And so he goes to interview Brenda, like, how do you feel about the fact people are just fucking dying? And she goes, I knew I should have gone to NYU. And we're like, everyone in the theater screams, and we're all really excited. And while we're riding the levity of that moment, we're taking back to our next urban legend, which is Natalie's roommate. Is
her amazing goth roommate.
Who's on lithium.
She's on lithium, and she fucks goth men on the internet.
And they have this
poor, beautiful horror.
They make her so hateable. We hate goth women in this movie.
Yeah. And it's like, and also the goth equals mentally ill, and horny, which good for, I mean, you know, she would be, this woman would be celebrated in our culture. She is punished in her time.
It's like the witch. It's like the witch burnings.
The witch burnings.
She would have been a girl boss by today's standards. So we set her up early on. She's having loud sex in their shared dorm, and she yells at Natalie and is like, don't turn on the lights and leave me alone. And Natalie has these the best noise canceling headphones that anyone's ever purchased, and sleeps with them on so that her roommate can have crazy horny sex. So the roommate is looking online for goth men. She finds a goth man in a chat room, and he's basically like, what's your dorm? I'll show up there. She goes to prep in the bathroom, comes back into her dorm room, and is immediately attacked.
Yeah.
While that's happening simultaneously.
While she's being attacked,
Natalie comes back from the friend's coffee shop and is like, oh, sorry, roommate, I'll put on my little headphones.
And she's like screaming her fucking head off.
It is not a sexy thing like we've seen to this point. She's actively dying, and we all realize as a viewer, again, screaming at our televisions, oh my God, fuck NYU. Also, this is that moment. This is, you shouldn't have, aren't you happy you didn't turn on the light?
Aren't you happy you didn't turn on the light? And yeah, and so Natalie turns on the light the next day, or the natural sunlight comes into her dorm room, sees Tosh is brutally murdered, basically.
I forgot her name was Tosh. Of course her fucking goth name is Tosh.
And then so Natalie tries to bring this up to school administration along with the death of Damon, and basically the school is like, well, Damon's in Aspen. Like, everyone just assumed he's an
but he has no skiing. Connection to Aspen. They just keep throwing out the word Aspen.
Like, how convenient. And then they're like, well, Tosh was manic depressive, so she killed herself. And Natalie was like, no, she was stabbed and choked and there's blood. And they're like, well, you know.
They say it's her suicide note.
The writing that says, aren't you glad you turned off the light? And this like crazy schizophrenic serial killer writing.
They're like, oh yeah, that's what goth people do. They write suicide notes in their blood on the wall. And they're like, they even say something like it was her poetic waxings or something, because she was like a writing student.
Yeah, she was fucked to death. I don't know. And
horrible.
So basically Natalie is left out basically in the lurch and trying to get anybody to pay attention to these murders. And then we learn that Natalie has connection to the first victim, Michelle Mancini, and they accidentally they were convicted of vehicular manslaughter back in high school for performing an urban legend in which they basically run somebody off the road for fun. I've never heard of this one. But
no, this one also is completely strange to me as well. But it's almost like she's able to finally grapple with that death while she's experiencing all of this other death. And I think she confesses that specifically to Paul, right? And then from whatever reason, from this point on, Paul and her are bonded and must Scooby-Doo their way through the rest of this movie.
Yeah, to try to find the real murderer.
So she like basically pours her heart out, and he's like, cool, now we can do this together. Let's go check out the creepy urban legend teacher's office.
Yeah.
And they're like, you're right. I know I just told you this whole thing about my heart, but let's go do this.
Yeah, well, first he's like very disappointed in her, and he's like, I can't believe you were convicted of vehicular manslaughter, but we have to.
You're right. It's so quick. He's like, this is horrible, but also, let's ride.
Oh, let's ride. Revving my hog through the morphing field.
Revving my hog towards my student pulsar. I must go.
No, he's kicked off the paper.
Not yet.
Really?
Oh, yeah, because this is what does
ignore
it.
Ignore that. Yeah, so, and then
He's still on the paper. Paul's back on the case.
Still in the running for my student Pulitzer.
Jazz hands. Just like.
And then, so the murderer flags so far are urban legend professor, the creepy janitor who just keeps showing up throughout the movie and doesn't do anything.
We don't like people that look weird in this movie. This is a very Hunchback of Notre Dame-esque witch burning of like creepy gas station attendant, weird janitor. We don't trust you if you're ugly.
It's like that New York Times thing where it was like, is it fair to be mean to ugly people?
Shut the fuck up.
It was, another murderer flag I thought of was Parker, aka Stu Light. Stu Impressionist, because he has a very insistent story about where Damon is. He's the reason everyone thinks Damon's in Aspen.
Totally.
He keeps pushing it.
Totally. But
Paul, I also say Paul is a suspect because Jared Leto.
Just because of his whole vibe.
His whole thing, yeah.
So Paul and Natalie basically break into the Urban Legends Professor Wexler into his office because they found he is associated with the original murder.
Stanley Hall.
The Stanley Hall murder, which is kind of where all of this lore keeps pointing back to. We don't necessarily unpack the murder that heavily yet.
They call it the massacre, yeah.
The Stanley Hall massacre.
And also there's no consensus over whether it is or isn't real. That's another urban legend associated with this school. And then when they go into Wexler's office, they get confirmation it did happen, and Wexler is the only survivor. So they assume that his motivation for the murder would be he goes crazy every year on the anniversary of the Stanley Hall massacre and starts stabbing people this time.
Putting on a parka in the middle of June and stabbing
And they do find a parka in his office, so it's pretty incriminating.
And then they get in trouble for breaking into his office.
Yeah, and then he's off the paper.
Then he's kicked off the paper.
Get out of here. Keep him moving.
And that kind of is what moves us into our next murder, which is the murder of Dean Adams, right?
Yeah, he gets ankle sliced in a parking lot.
This is my least favorite. I fucking hate this one.
This one's gnarly, and something I'm noticing about the murders throughout the film is that they actually aren't that graphic. And we don't really see the bodies a lot of like the actual
it's
corpses.
like cartoon violence. You're so right.
It actually, this movie, as we're going through it, it reminds me, besides the really corny dialogue, or it's like the dialogue that's trying to be witty and relevant, but instead it's just kind of corny and weird, and the whole structure of it doesn't remind me of Scream. It actually reminds me of like a classic 80s slasher. Because with Scream, it's quite grisly and gruesome, and we see the murders, and there's a lot of blood, and again, that emotional depth to it. Whereas this one, it like feels a bit lighter, and we don't see a lot of the murders. We don't see a lot of the deaths.
Yeah, it almost is. Is it Slumber Party Massacre that was meant to be a serious movie and then kind of became a spoof movie?
Slumber Party Massacre.
Yeah, it kind of has that air to it. You're so right. I've never thought about that. Where this actually did a better job of almost being like a blatant remake as opposed to making a commentary.
Yeah.
You're so right.
So that's what. So slashers are back. Urban legend.
75
million on the global box office.
We didn't change anything about it.
Yeah. Try to do something new, just made the same thing, but with a better budget.
That's it.
Good for them.
The Dean dies.
Yeah.
He's
gnarly
dead.
death over tire spikes.
Gnarly death over tire spikes.
Yeah, and the killer is running around campus, basically offing people so fast, so efficient. Microwaves the dog.
Well, wait, hold on. Things are going turbo.
Yeah.
We're in our last little bit, which all takes place in one night.
Yeah.
There's a party, which is the party to celebrate the massacre, because
Stanley Hall
the Stanley Hall massacre, because none of these children have any morals, ethics, or anything like that. So like even
classic youth defying death by laughing in its face, and
they do this several times. Like Paul, no, not Paul. Who's the shitty guy whose dog gets microwaved?
Parker. Stu Light.
Stu Light makes these horrible jokes about like I think he says something as literal as like face fucking the original dead girl, like horrible.
Yeah,
They make
this guy is very hateable and horrible.
which Stu is never this hateable
not.
and Billy's never this hateable, but I think they had to set this up in order for this last bit to make sense, which
Yeah.
I didn't know this is technically the second to last urban legend. I didn't know this one. Did you?
the dog one?
Yeah.
Oh, I've heard of that one. Yeah, I'd heard of it, and my mom told me because she's
A complicated woman. She's a I love
she does
that.
not fear the shadows of life.
She embraces.
Yeah, she exposes me to these things so she can watch horror movies when I'm a
love that
child.
so much. So while the party's taking place,
Gets a call.
Parker gets a call, and you think it's going to be one urban legend, and they actually spin it on its head. And we know obviously something's about to happen to his pet dog, because at the beginning of this party they're like feeding the dog beer and
my
like
God, they're funneling beer into this animal's snout.
and it's like a cute little West Highland Terrier.
Westie, and when I saw they were feeding the dog beer, I got really upset. Actually, what's the dog's name? Hootie.
Parker's so bad that we hate him so much that by proxy we're okay with the dog dying. I don't know why Jamie Blanks thought we wouldn't all be like, what the fuck? Because everyone's
Yeah.
pissed about this dog death.
Well, and it's like actually, I'd say that probably the goriest that we see in the film, and we just see basically. So Parker finds out that his dog has been microwaved, and we see from the inside of the microwave the result of the dog, and it's quite gruesome
This
and
is
nasty.
The only dynamic camera shot in the entire movie is this camera from inside the microwave that pans out. And that means, I guarantee you, this was like the first thing Jamie Blanks wrote.
That's what I was thinking too. Like that, it's definitely the most iconic scene. And like I remember watching Urban Legend years and years ago, probably when I was far too young, and I always remembered the dog microwave scene. I forgot everything else, but I remembered the dog.
Well, because everything else is forgettable. So
Yeah.
next, there's Parker gets Drano'd to death.
Drano Pop Rocks. Yeah.
Drano Pop Rocks.
Yeah,
we got Pop Rocks.
we
are
got an
part of
update
it.
of the Pop Rocks Pepsi myth, but instead of Pepsi, it's Drano, and I don't know. It's he vomits up blood. It's kind of gnarly, but we don't see it too much because they do like a Marilyn Manson editing thing on there.
You're right. It's edited like a music video.
Music video, yeah. So Jamie, get a little weird. I'm not gonna stop you.
Jamie Blanks gets crazy. Parker fucking dies. Then we're with Natalie and Paul. Natalie and Paul have a moment at the party where they're like, will they, won't they? They might kiss. Brenda sees this. Brenda is
loves
upset
Paul.
because Brenda loves Paul.
Yeah.
And then Natalie feels guilty for no reason. Natalie's done fucking nothing. And Brenda has never even
Natalie
expressed.
doesn't really have a no. Natalie and Brenda did say
Brenda
she liked Paul.
expressed, but they haven't communicated once in this movie.
That's true. Well, Natalie doesn't really do anything. She's just kind of this non-character.
Yeah, but this woman is always kind of that character. Like in every David Lynch film, she just kind of is like a beautiful, mysterious redhead.
She's so beautiful.
I have such an unexplainable crush on this woman.
I was looking at her and I was like, her little matte coffee-colored lipstick and her turtlenecks and her suede jacket and her beautiful blown-out hair, and I was like, oh, I love the 90s. Like,
Ex-horse girl is my type, and she
Ex-horse
really
girl.
gives it. It's horrible. But okay, so then we basically are in the final bits now. Tara Reid is our next victim. She
has quite a long chase scene.
She has so much time dedicated to her. And I also, the one thing, I always get confused with the logistics of the end here, because like in the middle of this party, which is a Saturday night party, Tara Reid's like, sorry, I have to go do my radio show.
Yeah,
Bails.
my sexy urban legend
It's like
radio
11:30.
Yeah, I was like, why are they? This is kind of weird. I guess it is like the midnight sex show. Is it supposed to be like Loveline?
Oh, you're exactly right.
And Loveline starts at like 11 p.m. or something
Okay.
like that. Yeah.
So just kidding.
It's
That's what she's
Loveline.
doing.
She's running her Loveline.
She's running her love line. The killer attacks her and brutalizes her, but it's not. Is there an urban legend associated?
So the urban legend is that basically of the radio host who is getting murdered live on air, or I think it's connected to that one love roller coaster song that they referenced during the party, where it's like you hear a woman scream, and it's actually the scream of someone being murdered, allegedly.
You're so right.
And so Tara's whole thing is she's on the radio and she's recording and can be listened to by everybody while she's getting chased and terrorized by this killer, and everyone's like, wow, she's just so in character for the Stanley Hall Massacre. Sasha, you're so wild. Her name's Sasha.
She's so in character, but has never once been a character ever or acted for any reason. And they're like, oh yeah, we buy this.
Mm-hmm.
She gets
the
got.
depth of this film is it's like a little puddle. There's
A little tiny puddle.
things just kind of happen
Horny,
because they're
bloody
supposed to happen.
puddle.
Um,
I feel like this
classic
movie,
slasher.
I feel like this movie would smell bad.
What would it smell like? What, like late 90s perfume?
I think it smelled like a mix of blood, poppers, and semen.
It's a very it's a very semen-y movie.
No
a lot of references to it.
A lot of references. She dies. Then
so
the
sad.
Campus,
I thought she'd make it, but she didn't. She's a whore, so she has to die.
she's a whore. There's so many funny scenes with her though, where she's in these
She's
crazy outfits and pigtails. You're just like,
I
what
know.
the fuck are you doing, Tara
And
Reid?
I'm like,
She
you're next. Like,
Yeah,
I love you, but you're next.
really think she's gonna be way sooner than she is. She gets got. The campus police officer finds her simultaneously. Brenda, Paul, and Natalie decide they're gonna escape campus, and you're like, okay, this is great. They're gonna get the fuck out of here.
They start finding everybody's bodies. Natalie basically saw Sasha get killed. And then she's like, we got to get the fuck out of here. But nobody, still the identity of the killer is unknown. Eventually, everyone kind of gets lopped off.
They all get in Paul's car.
Oh, yeah, they get in Paul's car.
They all get in Paul's car. They head to the gas station. While Paul is getting gas, Brenda and Natalie run around, realize there is a body in Paul's trunk.
Who is the body?
Who is the body? Is it the dean?
It's the professor.
It's the professor. It's the Professor Witt.
You didn't survive this Stanley Hall massacre.
Dun, dun, dun.
Oh, so sad.
Well,
Yeah,
because
he got at some point.
I think the girls think he's also like the guy. So all of a sudden, when he can't be the murderer, they're like, well, obviously it's Paul.
It's obviously Paul.
Which I don't know why it's obviously Paul, but
it was Paul's car, right?
but it's Paul's car. But again, later, that big brain, smooth brain, smooth brain.
I think we would really survive a long time in a horror movie.
In my defense, he's not the killer.
He's
so
not the killer.
I'm right.
Yeah.
Because if we think by that logic, we're dead. So they take off. They take off fucking on foot running.
Yeah.
And they get split.
Yeah.
And
Brenda just kind of I had to rewind and see because Brenda just kind of jumps onto the ground in the middle of her run and she's like, ah! And then Natalie is like, I don't give a fuck.
Honestly,
I'm
smart.
Yeah. No, you can't.
Brenda knew what she was doing. She had a plot and a plan. So I'm going to blow through this till we get to the final set piece.
So Natalie shows up in an abandoned house.
Because she thinks Brenda's being held captive there.
Yeah. And then she finds all the bodies of everybody who has been murdered so far. Just hung up in the closet, thrown on the floor.
It's a haunted house. It is a spirit Halloween.
Yeah, no, she literally opens the closet and it's there's LEDs and fog emitting from it and Damon's
Damon hangs down he's and then goes back. It is.
It's a bit 13 Ghosts.
No, don't do that to 13 Ghosts. These are this would have taken a full production team to get all these bodies in this fucking house, and we find out in a big reveal that it is
Brenda.
It's just Brenda.
It's that bitch Brenda. And she's crazy because her hair is really curly and big. I think it looks beautiful, but they're I'm a bit crazy, about it.
I'm a bit eccentric.
Oh yeah, you did it really good. I thought her performance was amazing, but
I think this is the worst acting anyone has ever given as a final character reveal. She's doing this doll thing where she's like, well, Natalie, you were such a good friend coming to save me, and I won't get you.
I'm getting itchy hearing that voice, actually.
It's horrible.
It's really bad. And
you could tell she was a mean girl in high school based on how she delivers this whole line.
And some context on Miss Gayheart. It's quite dark that, she is the murderer in the film, and she became a murderer because of vehicular manslaughter, because Miss Gayheart was convicted in 2001 of killing somebody via vehicular manslaughter.
Kind of like what she's mad at Natalie about.
Exactly. and she's so mad that she's so ready and she's so fast. There's no sense. There's no explanation. But she does bring up a projector to describe her villain origin story.
We get a full villain origin story. Her and her boyfriend were gonna get engaged, and they were so in love.
They were 17. So,
they couldn't afford a ring, so they make this makeshift ring that night, and they're really excited. On the way home from him proposing with this fake 17-year-old man ring,
his Walmart ring.
He is the victim of Natalie and Michelle's headlight game.
Oh my God, he was the one killed when they were convicted of vehicular manslaughter. And no.
I like that you have to say full vehicular manslaughter every time.
Because they say it. They say it.
They do say it a lot in
6
this
times.
movie. They do say
And
it
I
a lot
just
in
want to
this
make
movie.
sure everyone knows what happened.
That's
So
what happened.
That this man whose name we never get and whose face I think we only see in like
Gender.
the
The gender of
it
both
all.
of these.
Why are men disservicing themselves in this way?
These reek of gender.
This whole thing slaps of gender. Anyway, so Natalie has lost it. Her hair is big. She's screaming. She's using weird slang. And she's going to steal Natalie's kidney.
Everything has been so deliberate this whole time. Her and her puffer have killed all these people according to these
Puffer, yeah, where'd
urban
you get
legends.
Puffer?
Her fucking puffer have killed all of everyone according to these urban legends. And they've all really added up. Again, we never figure out how the fuck she carried all these full grown ass people's bodies into this house. I guess using Paul's car. I don't know. We then, after she's explained her villain origin story, Natalie's strapped to a bed. She's like, I'm going to cut out your kidney and sell it on the black market.
Because that's an urban legend. And it's never happened except for tonight.
But isn't she going to pin it on Natalie also? Like, I forget. How does she decide she's going to, what's her alibi?
Oh my God. Was she going to pin it on Dr. Wexler?
She's going to pin on Wexler.
Yeah.
She's going to pin on Wexler, and then her and Paul are going to ride
And he's
off
dead, so it doesn't matter.
into the
anyway.
sunset together. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then the one line that I will say specifically, and then we can talk about how this movie wraps up, is there's one line in this movie that actively, I've seen this movie now 3 times. I have almost turned this movie off at this line 3 times because Natalie is doing her, no, not Natalie, I'm sorry. Brenda is doing her crazy thing where she's explaining her whole origin story. And Natalie's trying to communicate with her. And she's like, yeah, I'm a little nutty. But you know what, Miss Thang?
Oh
why
my God,
don't you?
the Miss Thang line. I was like, ooh.
I just don't understand who wrote her dialogue and
His
who
name was
directed her.
Giorgio? What was his name? Who wrote this fucking movie?
Jamie Blanks could not keep a grip on Rebecca Gayheart this whole movie. She's
she
gleeful.
fought for her life to get this role.
What?
Apparently. Yeah.
What?
Yeah,
What?
she had to audition like 6 times. And I'm like, if you have to audition. Okay, it was written by Silvio Horta, who worked at a perfume counter when he wrote this movie.
Get
which
your
I
bag.
think is cool.
Yeah,
I would do that.
that's how we
Write
win.
a horror.
That's how he wins.
That's how we win.
That's how we
We're
win.
gonna
Horrible villain. Yeah, so the
Yeah, she's
campus
not
cop shows up to try
Shoots
to
her.
shoots her. She survives. She gets attacked. Finally, in our last bit, we have Paul arrive, and Paul tries to do a lot of like what Cotton did in Scream 2, where he tries to bargain with Brenda.
Yeah.
and it's like, you and I can be together, and we can I can tell this whole story, and I'll win my Pulitzer, and then we'll be rich and in love
more
together.
framing around how it's going to be sold as a story after the crime.
More the
But done very poorly and irrelevantly within the plot.
so then she dies. I think
And
he shoots her.
He shoots her. No, the campus cop shoots her.
Women
'cause
on
it's
women violence. That's the only way.
Why? Why must
Women
women
shooting
fight?
women shooting
Women
people.
shooting women.
Women shooting women. There's
Why
a
must
lot
women
of it.
fight?
Why do women can't shoot guns? Why do women do this?
And it's I just remembered it's Reese who kills her because it's like because Rebecca Gayheart is like trying to decide who she's gonna shoot, Natalie or Paul. I don't know why she's doing this weird thing. It's another weird thing she's doing. She's like eeny, meeny, miny, and then Reese is like, and then she just like stares at the camera for 10
Reese
seconds.
say Mo?
She
I think
stares
Reese
at the
goes Mo.
No,
and
she says
oh.
she stares at the camera for 10 seconds and then she says Mo. Because I was like waiting. I was like, when's she gonna say it? Paul and Natalie and they leave Reese there. I don't know. These are very horrible children. They drive away. Brenda somehow her speedy little ass got into the back seat, tries to stab him. They push her out of the car over a bridge, and then they're like, the evil is over.
But we never
is it?
found that body.
They never found the body.
And then we get to end in a way that no one wanted it to end. We end how we began, which is a bunch of teens that are all 40.
Yeah.
They are 40-year-old parents dressed in crop tops and tank tops and t-shirts.
Yeah, and this group is a bit they're not as like hot and cool and young as the first group.
No, they're
So
weird.
let them graduate.
Let them get out of here.
Free
They're all
them.
master's students, and they're all talking about this urban legend, specifically of the most recent murders that happened at the college.
Mhm.
And the last person to talk is Brenda.
Who says, "Here's how it really happened," and then we get a great like do 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 do, and then the hip 90s title sequence.
The title sequence and all the music is like such a weird mix up of like The Craft and like it's every weird, slightly spooky. It's too witchy for this. The soundtrack is very weird.
Yeah, it's a kind of like low IQ movie, and
Smooth
but it's
brain.
a bit of like a.
It's a smooth brain
It's
movie.
trying to do like a dark academia soundtrack, like something with a few more considerations about themes of gender, and this movie just doesn't have it.
True.
On that note, is it a good movie or a bad movie?
I'll go first. I think this is a good movie only because it's so fun.
It's really fun. Yeah, it was a breeze to get through. Like,
Oh, yeah.
I was like laughing. I wasn't thinking.
No, and
I had no thoughts.
again,
about it,
what I said earlier on, Jamie Blanks clearly had a lot of fun. Even that I think if they would have given him a little more money, like even the camera shot, that dog scene sits with everyone. Like
the editing, the Marilyn Manson editing, when they let him edit a little bit.
Yeah, when they gave him a little control, I think this could have been really good if we would have given Jamie Blanks a chance. But for the sake of it being a fun Jeepers Creepers-esque throwaway MTV
Love
movie,
Jeepers Creepers.
this was on MTV.
Yeah,
There's
it
just
was
no way.
MTV movie.
Yeah,
yeah,
it's a blast.
Yeah.
I call it a good movie.
I call it a good movie too, and especially when you like. I've been thinking a lot about like how it's definitely not on the same level as Scream, but if you just see it as just a slasher, like a slasher set in the 90s, it's like, but otherwise pretty classic to the formula. It works great. The kills are super creative, but I also like that it's not too like grisly and gruesome.
Cartoon violence.
Yeah, it's a bit of cartoon violence, and there's not really any great performances, but it's pretty entertaining. If just for because it like once it picks up, like these kids are getting killed. It does not let down basically until that crazy final scene with Miss Thing, Brenda.
There's so much momentum till the end, but it's
yeah.
good.
Yeah, good movie. Two good movies.
Two good
We're so
movies.
lucky.
Who's gonna have a good day today? Us.
Us.
We're gonna have the best day ever.
We just talked about two good movies. So rarely we get that in life.
So rarely.
I think, there's probably only like 7 good movies in the world,
and
and we watched 2 of them.
Aren't we blessed?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what a day.
What a day.
They should here's my only note to Jamie Blanks and Wes.
Yes.
Let's make a movie where everyone is a horny goth girl.
Yeah.
And then
And they all live.
and they all live. It's just a utopia movie.
Oh, so beautiful. Why make a movie? Why not just start a cult?
Perfect.
Will you join?
Join us?
Yeah.
I think next week we're gonna do another silly horror duo.
It's
and
almost October.
It's almost October.
As of recording this, it's almost October.
As of recording this, almost October. We'll be a little spooky, and then we'll start getting a little bit more serious. But thanks for joining us on one of our early episodes, and you'll hear from us soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.